Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. So friends, I'd like to welcome you for this Wednesday evening's Sutta. It's the third one in our series. And tonight's the Sutta is...
Oh, it's in the basement.
Please mute your mics. Prashant, you're supposed to be muting everybody's mics. So this is number 9 of the Majjhima Nikaya, the Sammaditthi Sutta, or the Discourse on Right View. And of course, right view is very important because it's the very first step of the Noble Eightfold Path. I hope everyone was able to look at the sutta from the link I gave you or from some other source, look through it. But if not, I'm going to be reading parts of it because the way the Buddha, well, actually this sutta is given by the Venerable Sariputra. So many of you know who Venerable Sariputta was, the Buddhist chief disciple and the one who was known for being able to expound the Dhamma, second only to the Buddha. So this sutta was given at Savatthi to the assembly of monks. And actually, Sariputta, again, he was giving this sutra, and he asked the monks, or he told them, one of right view, it is said. In what way is a noble disciple one of right view, whose view is straight, who has unwavering confidence in the Dhamma, and is arrived at this true Dhamma. So now, in saying that the disciple whose view is straight, who has attained unwavering confidence in the Dhamma and arrived at the true Dhamma, so that's referring to actually somebody who has reached the first stage of entering the stream, or the Sotapanna. So again, as in the previous sutta we were going over, most of the monks in the group that he was talking to had reached at least that first stage of enlightenment. And then the monks replied to him, "Indeed, friend, we would come from far away to learn from the Venerable Sariputta the meaning of this statement. It would be good if the Venerable Sariputta would explain the meaning of this statement, one of right view. Having heard it from him, the bhikkhus will remember it." Then the Venerable Sariputta said, "Then friends, listen and attend closely to what I will say." He said, "Yes, friend." And so then the Venerable Sariputta then begins this sutta. He says, "When a noble disciple understands the unwholesome and the root of the unwholesome, in that way he is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has unwavering confidence in the Dhamma and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what, friends, is the unwholesome? And what is the root of the unwholesome? So the unwholesome means the 10 kinds of unskillful karma. You know, what are called the negative actions. And so he explains them. He said, killing living beings is unwholesome. Taking what is not given is unwholesome. Misconduct in sensual pleasures is unwholesome. False speech is unwholesome. Malicious speech is unwholesome. Harsh speech is unwholesome. Gossip or rumor mongering is unwholesome. Covetousness is unwholesome. Ill will is unwholesome. Wrong view is unwholesome. This is called the unwholesome, or the unskillful actions. And what is the root of the unwholesome? Greed is a root of the unwholesome. Hate is a root of the unwholesome. Delusion is a root of the unwholesome. This is called the root of the unwholesome. So we have the 10 negative karmic actions, and 3 of them are actions by the body, 4 of them are actions with speech, and 3 are from the mind. And so these are the actual, unwholesome karmic actions that we do, but there's a cause for them, and so that is the root. So Sariputta wanted the monks to know that, okay, these are the 10 unwholesome actions, but what are their roots? What gives rise to them? And so those are what the 3 roots are: greed, hatred, and delusion. These are called the 3 roots of suffering, but it's actually the karmic actions and negative karmic actions that we do that then bring their painful results as various types of pain and suffering as a result of those actions. And then he goes on to then say, and what is the wholesome? Abstaining from killing living beings is wholesome. Abstaining from all of those 10 negative actions is wholesome. So basically, it's just the opposite of the unwholesome. The wholesome would be abstaining from all those 10 negative karmic actions. And what is the root of the wholesome? Non-greed is the root of the wholesome. Non-hatred is the root of the unwholesome. And the and non-delusion is the root of the unwholesome. Excuse me, the root of the wholesome. So we have the wholesome, the 10 unwholesome actions and the roots, and the 10 wholesome actions in their roots. And then he goes on to say, when a noble disciple has thus understood the wholesome and the root of the unwholesome, the unwholesome and the root of the unwholesome, the wholesome and the root of the wholesome, he entirely abandons the underlying tendency to lust or greed. He abolishes the underlying tendency to hate or aversion, and he extirpates or uproots the underlying tendency to the view and conceit I am. And by abandoning ignorance and arousing true knowledge, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way, a noble disciple is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has unwavering confidence in the Dhamma, and has arrived at this true Dhamma. So, if one understands those 10 unwholesome kinds of actions, and the wholesome, what is wholesome actions, and lives in accordance with that, and develops it, and undermines the root of those, one can, reach the any of those 4 stages of enlightenment. So, having that said that much, bhikkhus were delighted and rejoiced in what the Venerable Sariputta had said. Then they asked him a further question. But friend, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma? And Venerable Sariputta says, there might be, friend. And then he continues, when a noble disciple understands nutriment, the origin of nutriment, the cessation of nutriment, and the way leading to the cessation of nutriment, in that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. So now he's going to explain what are called the 4 kinds of food or nutriment. And what is nutriment? What is the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation of nutriment? There are 4 kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that have come to be and for support of those who are about to come to be. What are they? Physical food, gross or subtle. So it's the kind of actual material food that we eat that is nutriment for the physical cells of this body and to keep this body basically living. And then the second one is contact, and this means a contact with the 5 senses. So having contact with the visible objects, sounds, smells, tastes, and body sensations. And those contacts gives rise to the feelings, the various type of feelings that we experience, the pleasant feeling, the painful feeling, and the neutral feelings. So without these contacts, the body would actually not develop and probably die. They've done experience even with human beings. If a baby doesn't get any physical contact at all, like any touch from the mother or others, or he doesn't hear or smell or see anything, his senses and nervous system wouldn't develop, and basically he would just wither. That baby would wither on the vine and die without that contact, because that's how our brain develops, is through contact and then developing language and memory. But if that contact doesn't occur, then the brain doesn't develop, and the baby would essentially either become like a vegetable or die. So that's why contact with the senses, that means the contact with the world around us, is considered food for the mind, but even for the body, but especially of the mind. So and then there's the volition. Volition is the 3rd nutriment. So basically that means the actions that we take, basically the karmic actions that we take based upon those contacts. So this is part of, paticca samuppada, dependent origination, that without the volition, that means we react to a sensory stimulus, either with a desire for it or aversion to it, or just simply a non-reactive kind of reaction or neutral feeling. So all the volition is volition directed towards pleasurable feeling, to get pleasurable feeling, to get away from painful feeling, or just kind of ignoring neutral feeling. But primarily it's the karmic actions because of the greed and desire want for the pleasurable feeling, then we do volition. And again, that's what also develops the nervous system and the memory and makes the mind grow. If there's no reaction to anything, then basically also the mind will cease to evolve, and one would stay in a very infantile kind of mental state. And then the fourth kind of nutriment is consciousness. And basically that's the ego consciousness. And I've explained in other places where how the ego consciousness arises with the baby. And he starts learning and he starts focusing the attention externally. And the subject-object or ego consciousness gradually develops, and the whole life is driven by that I want to do this, I want to achieve that, I don't like this, I don't like that. And basically the whole life revolves around the sense of I, or I, me, and mine. So we feed off of that. People feed their egos, don't they? We can see it so in a lot of places, especially with politicians and others, or people feeding their egos. So it's a kind of food, people that drives them. And so does our volition, our wanting to do things, the wanting. That's basically the volition. We want to do so many things, and so we do all these things. It's the volition. And that's our food, which keeps us going. If you don't do anything, people will just get in a morbid state, and they have to do something, because that doing is what feeds their ego. So you can see how these four things are really the food for our life. Material food for the body, but then you have contact, volition, and consciousness that are feeding the mind. And without the contact, then volition or consciousness also won't arise. That's why they're considered these the main types of food. So after having expounded those four nutriments, he gives what is the arising of these nutriments. With the arising of craving, the nutriments arise. And so basically this means the craving from the previous life gives rise actually to even the rebirth consciousness in this life. And then the baby's born and it has to eat food for the body to grow, and it has all these new contexts and volitions and consciousness in this life. But it's the craving that, feeds those, the craving for those contacts, because of the craving to live. And then the way leading to the cessation of the nutriment is the Noble Eightfold Path. That is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. I forgot to mention, well, with the cessation of craving, there's a cessation of nutriment. And then the way leading to the cessation of nutriment, as I just mentioned, the Noble Eightfold Path. And then he repeats this standard phrases after each of these categories. When a noble disciple has thus understood nutriment, the origin of nutriment, the cessation of nutriment, and the way leading to the cessation of nutriment, he entirely abandons the underlying tendency to greed. He abolishes the underlying tendency to aversion. He uproots the underlying tendency to the view and conceit, I am. And by abandoning ignorance and arousing true knowledge, he or she here and now makes an end of suffering. And in that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has unwavering confidence in the Dhamma, and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And so the monks were delighted and rejoiced in Venerable Sariputta's explanation of the nutriments. But then they asked him a further question. But friend, might there be another way in which a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma? Venerable Sariputta replies, there might be, friends. And then he goes on to explain the third one. When, friends, a noble disciple understands suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering, in that way, he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is suffering? What is the origin of suffering? What is the cessation of suffering? And what is the way leading to the cessation of suffering? And then he explains the suffering, and I went over this in one of the previous, I think, Sutta studies, or even perhaps the Dhamma talk, but I'll just repeat it. Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, sickness is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are suffering. Not to obtain what one wants is suffering. And in short, the five aggregates affected by clinging are suffering. This is called suffering. And in last Sunday's Dhamma talk, I gave a whole Dhamma talk explaining those five aggregates of clinging. And so he gives a standard definition. What is the origin of suffering? It's the craving which brings renewal of being, accompanied by delight and lust, that delights in this and that is craving for sensual pleasures, the craving for being, and craving for non-being. This is called the origin of suffering. And what is the cessation of suffering? It's the remainderless fading away and ceasing, the giving up, the relinquishing, the letting go of that same craving. This is called the cessation of craving, of suffering, excuse me. And what is the way leading to the cessation of suffering? It is just this Noble Eightfold Path. And the 8 factors of the Eightfold Path. So when a noble disciple has thus understood suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering, he here and now makes an end of suffering. And in that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. So actually, the Four Noble Truths, these are normally what is called ignorance. The definition of ignorance is not understanding suffering, the cause, the cessation, and the path leading to the end of suffering. So, and that is actually when one attains the Sotapanna stage, the first stage of enlightenment, that's when one clearly sees the Four Noble Truths. And So going on from that, the bhikkhus, of course, were delighted and rejoiced in how Venerable Sariputta explained that. Then they asked him a further question. But friend, might there be another way in which the noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma? Venerable Sariputta replies, there might be, friends. And then he goes on to actually go through the whole Paticca Samuppada, using the same kind of format. So I'm not going to repeat everything from that, but just to kind of get started. When a noble disciple understands aging and death, the origin of aging and death, the cessation of aging and death, and the way leading to the cessation of aging and death, in that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is aging and death? It's the aging of beings in various ways, their old age, broken teeth, grayness of hair, wrinkling the skin, decline of the life faculty. This is called aging. And the passing away of different beings out of the different realms. This is their passing away, dissolution, dying of the aggregates, laying down of the body. This is called death. And so with the, then he says, what is the arising of aging and death? This is very interesting. The arising of aging and death. Now, if you ask a common person, what's the cause of aging and death? They'll give you all kinds of things. Well, the body gets old and all these things happen and people could die of heart attacks and so many things. But the Buddha gives a very interesting origin of aging and death. And he says, with the arising of birth, there's the arising of aging and death. So it's very interesting that birth is the cause of death, right? Because if you weren't born, you won't die. If you weren't born, you're not going to have aging and death. So the real cause of death is birth, from the Dhamma point of view. Now, doctors probably might not be so interested in that, but from the Dhamma point of view, that's the way we try to see it. And with the cessation of birth, there's a cessation of aging and death. And the way leading to the cessation of aging and death is just this Noble Eightfold Path. I'm not going to repeat them all because you should have them memorized by now. So when one understands that the aging and death, the origin, cessation, and the way, one here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And so they keep on asking the same thing. Is there another way one gets right view? And so then the Buddha, goes on to say, when one understands birth, the origin of birth, the cessation of birth, and the way leading to the cessation of birth, that's how one also is one of right view. And what is birth? It's the birth of beings. I'm not going to go through all the details. You can read that. And what is the cessation of birth? When with the arising of birth, or with the arising of being, there's the arising of birth. So this might be a little bit more complicated. That the rising of being, or bhava, the Pali word is bhava. So this means the karmic accumulations that we accumulated in the previous life, the sankharas, those are what give rise to the birth in the new life. So that's what it's referring to. That the arising of being, because of being, that's the stimulus that gives rise to the rebirth, linking consciousness and birth. And with the cessation of being, that means when one attains full enlightenment, only then is there the cessation of birth in the standard lifetime to lifetime interpretation. And there's another interpretation of birth and death too, but we'll maybe talk about that in some further talks or sutta study. So with the understanding of birth and the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation, the Noble Eightfold Path, one arrives at the true Dhamma. And so, again, after that, they said, then he explains them, they want to know another way of understanding right view. When a noble disciple understands being, and the origin of being, the cessation of being. And what is the origin of being? Or what is being? That means it's life in the sense sphere, with a fine material being and the immaterial being. That refers to the three main worlds where the mind can be reborn. I'm not going to go into the details of that now, but basically it means being born as a human being or an animal or devas, and then the immaterial beings are is a little bit more complicated to understand, but basically it means the planes of rebirth, the various planes of rebirth, and the karma that gets you born into those planes of rebirth. For you, so you have to develop being in, like the fine material rebirth, you have to master the jhanas to be reborn in the fine material beings, or you have to master the immaterial jhanas to be reborn in the immaterial being. And so you have to practice. So that's what it means, that the being is creating the karma, the karmic accumulation that is going to cause you to be reborn in one of those realms of birth. So that's why without a cause, without the previous causes from a previous life, one is not going to arise, in a particular one of those particular realms. But even in this life itself, we have to go on creating karma in order for our life to go on, even from moment to moment in our mind. But again, that's another little bit more complicated thing to understand. And then they go on to the clinging. Then he covers clinging. When one understands clinging, the origin, the cessation, and the path leading to it. What is the source of clinging? That's the craving. And then it goes from craving to then to feeling and contact, and then the six senses, and then the five aggregates, the sixfold base, again repeating basically verbatim the same format that he went through previously. So when one understands mentality and materiality, basically that's the aggregates, the origin, the cause, the cessation, and the path leading to the cessation. In that way, here's a right view. And then even consciousness. When one understands consciousness, the origin of consciousness, the cessation of consciousness, and the way leading to the cessation of consciousness, in that way, one is of right view. And by entirely abandoning the underlying tendency to desire, aversion, to the conceit I am, abandoning ignorance, arousing true knowledge, one here and now makes an end of suffering. In this way, also one is of right view. And then after consciousness, there's the formations. Because again, this is basically the Paticca Samuppada. So any of those who are familiar with the Paticca Samuppada, you can reread that. There's plenty of sutras explaining that. And then, they ask him again, well, is there another way to understand right view? When one understands the formations, now that means the sankharas, the origin of the sankharas, the cessation of the sankharas, and the way leading to the cessation of the sankharas. And then what is the cause of the sankharas? That's ignorance. Ignorance is the cause of sankharas. When one understands ignorance, the origin of ignorance, the cessation of ignorance, and the way leading to the cessation of ignorance, in that way he is one of right view and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is ignorance? What is the origin of ignorance? The cessation, the path, not knowing about suffering, not knowing about the origin of suffering, not knowing about the cessation of suffering, not knowing about the way leading to the cessation of suffering. This is called ignorance. So basically, he just repeated the Four Noble Truths. Not understanding suffering, the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation of ignorance. So, as I had mentioned before, ignorance is defined as not knowing the Four Noble Truths. So when a noble disciple has thus understood ignorance, the origin of ignorance, the cessation and the way, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way too, a noble disciple is one of right view, has arrived at this true Dhamma. And so it's referring also to the ignorance from the previous life is what gives rise to the mental formations in this life when the baby is born. And that produces consciousness too. Okay, having said that, having gone through the whole Paticca Samuppada, then there's one last one he talks about. And they ask him a further question. But friend, might there be another way in which the noble disciple is one of right view? And, by this time, Sariputta was probably, getting, kind of exasperated with all these, wanting to learn more and more. Had they just understood the first one, they could have attained enlightenment. So anyway, being compassionate as Venerable Sariputta was, he says, there might be, friends, when a noble disciple understands the taints, the origin of the taints, the cessation of the taints, and the way leading to the cessation of the taints. In this way, one is called the right view. So the taints are, there's said to be 3 taints or main defilements, but there's other categories of them too, so sometimes it's a little confusing, but basically it's a sensual desire, the taint of being, that means craving for the I, me, and mine, to live, to enjoy, and then the taint of ignorance, of not knowing the truth, basically. And it's the ignorance from the past life that gives rise to the ignorance in this life and the taints that we had accumulated in the past life. So, so I'm just going to read one more time the last paragraph. So when a noble disciple has thus understood the taints, the origin of the taints, the cessation of the taints, and the way leading to the cessation of the taints, he entirely abandons the underlying tendency to lust or greed. He abolishes the underlying tendency to hate or aversion. He uproots the underlying tendency to the view and conceit, I am. By abandoning ignorance and arousing true knowledge, he here and now makes an end of suffering. In that way, too, a noble disciple is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has unwavering confidence in the Dhamma, and has arrived at this true Dhamma. And then finally, the bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted in the Venerable Sariputta's words and gave him a break. So, if they couldn't get it from all of that, then, they probably were not going to be able to get anything. So, anyway, so that's the exposition on the right view. And so it's basically, the understanding of the Four Noble Truths and all the other aspects of the Dhamma and the Paticca Samuppada, all of those things, if one understands that phenomenon, the origin of it, the cessation of it, and the way leading to the cessation of it, then that's enough to really allow a person to get that, first glimpse of the unconditioned and then even the further 3 or 4 stages. So that brings the sutta to an end. And now we can have some, if there's any questions to that. Let me just see if there's. I guess it doesn't look like there's any questions. Prashant, are you there? Are there any questions in the chat? Okay. Oh, the question is, what is the difference between ignorance and the taint of ignorance? How taint of ignorance causes ignorance? Again, sometimes these words overlap, but the ignorance from a previous life gives rise to the taint of ignorance in this life. So you have to understand the idea of how the mind continues in the process of birth and death to understand how these words can overlap. So the causes from the previous life, the ignorance and the accumulated karma, the being from the past life, is then comes along with the next life. And those sankharas and the ignorance gives rise to the fresh ignorance and the sankharas in the next life, and the consciousness in the next life. So that's how these words sometimes overlap, can be the cause as well as the result from the past, but the cause for the future. So the ignorance from the past life generated the rebirth in this life, but the ignorance that we continue in this life goes on to creating more karma in this life, and then it will be continued when the person dies. Then that ignorance and the karmic accumulation will then be the fuel for generating the next life, and it goes on like that, infinitum. But this can also be explained even in the one life, and I may get to that later in some other talk, how even the, each moment of ignorance and consciousness and karmic accumulation gives rise to the further ones, the whole Paticca Samuppada, 12 links to the Paticca Samuppada, are coming and going every second or mind moment. That whole process, the 12 links of dependent origination, basically makes a round in one mind moment. So just a nanosecond, that whole process, with each moment of contact, consciousness arises, and that whole process cycles through. And ignorance and formations keep growing every time we do a karmic action and volition. They keep growing. What is the most oh, wait a minute. I can't move this, Prashant, this chat thing. I missed a chat. Can you take me back a little bit? Okay. What is the most essential factor of right view to remember? The Four Noble Truths: suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering. But there's other aspects to it, also understanding anicca, dukkha, and anatta. So it would take too long to go over all the details of that now. Can you please repeat the explanation of the nutriment of contact? Basically, it's a contact of our senses. So we crave to see, right? And so we're always wanting to look. And so when everything we look at is a contact on the eye, and it goes through, and we either think it's something pleasing and we want to look at it, or something that's not pleasing, we don't want to look at it. We get interested in it, and then we take actions based upon it. And the same for sounds, smells, taste, body sensations, and even thoughts in your mind. Like just if a thought pops into your mind, maybe a memory of your mother who died, then you get sad. Okay, that's a mental contact. And you're conscious, you become conscious of a mental memory, which is a contact, and that produces feeling, and then that triggers off our craving or aversion or sadness, and maybe further thoughts about it. So that's the way we have to understand it. And we live off that. Without that continual thinking and doing of the mind, then again, as I said, the person's mind will atrophy, and it won't develop. And that's why it's difficult to overcome one's thoughts, basically. Conceit of I am is one of the wrong views. Yes, in fact, it's the conceit or ignorance of what the I is that blocks us from reaching the stream entry. And so even understanding that the sense of I is an illusion helps you to meditate. And when you gain that entering the stream is when you get your first glimpse how the sense of I is an illusion. And so that weakens that conceit. You no longer, before you thought you were somebody real and this and that, but then you see actually it's an illusion created in the mind, and you lose that drive to want to bolster it up and rule over others or so on. So anyway, and you see it as the cause of suffering. So that's part of the one. Yeah, that's part of the anatta. Anatta means seeing through the illusion of the ego, which means the conceit of I am. Do taints arise as thoughts? Well, yes. Desire, the taint of sensual desire, those are thoughts, right? Oh, I wish I had this, I wish I had that. Or the taint of being, oh, I want to gain this, I want to, do all these things. That's the taint of being. the craving to live, or the craving for non-being, or the taint of wrong views in this sense. So, yeah, it's all connected with thoughts. This question, sila is only related to body and speech, but not to the mind. Yeah, the traditional practice of sila, like the precepts, is restraining the actions of our body and speech primarily. But we restrain them because the power of our mind. We can't restrain them unless we have mindfulness, unless we have right understanding and the right effort. So all of that requires thoughts. So, but the actual sila itself is the restraint. But restraining from doing those 10 unwholesome actions. But without the mind and the right views, then you won't be able to. And in fact, next week's sutta, okay. Next week's sutta is going to be on the Mahachattārisaka Sutta, number 117 in Majjhima Nikaya. It's called the Great 40, and it explains how all of the steps of the Eightfold Path require right view, right effort, and right mindfulness. And so that's the Great 40, Sutra on the Great 40, the explanation of that. So there's a lot of good information in that sutta as well. Okay. When someone achieves enlightenment, does it benefit those unenlightened still? Of course it does. If the Buddha wasn't enlightened, the Buddha benefited so many hundreds and thousands of people and is still benefiting us because of his enlightenment, right? Is there less suffering in existence, or is it all individual striving? It'd take too much time to try to explain that. Existence is the source of suffering. Or if you're talking about being, living in the life. There's individual suffering and there's collective suffering. But, it's still, even the collective suffering is experienced by the individual mind. Like now we have this pandemic, right? Okay, so that physical suffering is affecting everybody in the whole world. Now, some people are going to be more affected by it than others, have more worry, fear, agitation, and problems, and others may not have so much worry and problems about it. So that's individual. That's how the people react to the external suffering. But the practice of Dhamma is about the mental suffering, really, curing the mental suffering. Because greed, hatred, and delusion has also generated a lot of the reasons for physical suffering. Like our greed for fossil fuels and comforts and all that have created the climate change. If you believe that theory, which we do. But so that's caused by the mind, by individual's mind, creating damaging the earth, polluting the earth because of our greed, hatred, and delusion, and causing the world wars and all these things. It's all started by our mind. The mind of individual people. All these approaches are equal in effectiveness, and any one can lead to right view. They all understood using the same approach. But probably, really the main one, because it includes all the other one, is the Four Noble Truths, understanding what is suffering, the cause of suffering, the ending of suffering, and the way leading to the ending of suffering. And you can, that can be developed through vipassana meditation, or, some people think that, some people say, oh, you can attain enlightenment through concentration, but it's only through the concentration you're developing insight into anicca, dukkha, and anatta. So that's also a kind of vipassana. So really there's no difference. It's just different methods of reaching the insight. You might get it through vipassana practice, and you might get it through going through all of the series of jhanas, all the way up to the cessation of feeling and perception. That's the only way you can attain enlightenment, is by going through all those jhanas. If you're following the strictly a samadhi method, you have to go through all of those of form jhanas, formless jhanas, even up to Nirodha Samapatti. And I doubt if there's very many people who have the right conditions to do that. But if they do, then all the power to them. But in that, you still understand the Four Noble Truths. You reach it by understanding that. Whether it comes to vipassana or it comes to samadhi, it's still vipassana. But you have to practice the vipassana through those samadhis by reflecting on them. And reflecting on anicca, dukkha, and anatta, each of those first, second, third, fourth jhana, immaterial jhanas. That's the way the Buddha explained it. So just attaining samadhi alone is not the way. It's got to be connected with wisdom. And that's why this the Mahachattari Sutta next week is very important, because it talks about right concentration, includes all the factors of right view, right effort. All the Eightfold Steps of the Eightfold Path are included in right concentration. Otherwise, it's just concentration. It's not right concentration. So this will be important to understand that. Okay, I think we're going to finish up. What kind of consciousness is meant in the third link of dependent origination? The relinking consciousness. That means when, from lifetime to lifetime, when you die, the consciousness is what exits and takes birth in another womb or in another loka, along with the ignorance and the karma formations. And so that's, in the traditional way, it's that relinking consciousness. But even from moment to moment, as I already mentioned, the whole paticca samuppada has gone through in each moment. As I've been talking here, it's been happening hundreds and tens of thousands of times already in the space of, less than an hour. But, it's not easy to see that. It takes a lot of meditation to understand that aspect of it. And I'll, before there's a series of talks and sutta studies, I may get around to try to explain that a little bit more. It's natural to feel aversion to physical pain in the body, but aversion is a volitional action. How can one stop that volitional action? No, aversion is a thought. The volitional action is the action you take based on the thought, or the thoughts you go on thinking. So yes, but the initial thought of aversion, like you feel a painful feeling, and where you remember somebody who wronged you, and then this painful feeling arises. Okay, then you start thinking about it. So yes, that's the volitional formations, or the action of moving your body or punching somebody in the nose or whatever. So even thoughts and body actions are within the sankhara kanda, the aggregate of sankharas. How can we stop the volitional action? Is by understanding all these things we've just been talking about, but especially in developing mindfulness, right understanding, and right effort. So again, we come back to the Mahachattari Sutta next week. Okay, check it out. So that's what it explains. Everything depends on right understanding. With that, you apply the right effort and you apply the right mindfulness. And that applies to all of those factors of the Eightfold Path. Okay, friends, I think that's the end of the questions, and it's good questions. But again, it's only the meditation practice is really going to answer those questions. But I hope that in the next week or so, or in your meditation, those things we went over, like nutriments and and all the paticca samuppada, these are things you can study and understand, and you can contemplate them. And like the four nutriments, try to understand how each of these helps to power this life. And of course, then, all the other stages we went through. But again, there's three levels of understanding: the intellectual understanding, and the understanding that comes through the Sutramaya Panya. In fact, Sutramaya Panya is called understanding gotten from reading the suttas. And then when you meditate and you try to understand these and observe what's happening in your body and mind, then you start to understand it at a kind of a deeper level, not so much just intellectual, but a direct seeing level. And then finally, the level of the deep insights. So, okay, friends, I think we'll stop with that. And so those who are living over in Europe or in other places where it's very late in the early morning right now, feel free to take your rest if you haven't already. And then for those who like to stay for a little meditation, we'll do a few stretching exercises, and then sit for a guided meditation of maybe about 30 minutes or so. Okay? So take a minute to stand up, and if you need to use the restroom real quickly or take a drink of water, you can do that. So just stand straight, feel your feet pressing the floor, and gently close the eyes. Just feel the feet pressing the floor, the arms and hands hanging at the sides. And then begin taking a few deep, slow breaths. After breathing in, hold the air in your lungs for 2 or 3 seconds. Then slowly breathe out. We coordinate these simple movements with the breathing, doing the movement while breathing in, holding that position for 2 or 3 seconds, returning to the starting point, or the opposite direction on the out breath. And repeating each one 3 times. So you can open the eyes and observe me as I'm doing that and talking you through it. So on the next in-breath, raise the arms over the head, interlock the fingers, turn the palms up, straighten the arms, and stretch your head back and stretch upwards at the same time. On the out-breath, turn the palms down and touch the top of your head. Again, in-breath, palms up, straighten the arms, head back. Stretch up. Out breath, touch the top of the head. Once more, in breath. This time hold that upward stretch longer. And release your fingers on the out breath, lower the arms back to the sides. Just relax. Keep the attention focused in the body. Try to feel the effects of the breathing and movement in the body, such as increased pulsation or heartbeat, tingling sensations, or even just feel the clothing touching against the skin of your arms, shoulders, chest. Just letting go of your thoughts. Just let the thoughts come and go in the back of the mind. Just remember standing, the present moment of the body. Okay, on the next in-breath, push up on the toes and raise the arms over the head like this, facing the palms together, and stretch up. And the out-breath, arms back to the side, heels to the ground. Use the breath to help lift and lower the body. The in-breath, lifting up, like blowing up a helium balloon. Out. In. Out. Relax. As you try to feel some increased pulsations in your hands or fingers. Just any other sensations on the body that you notice. Feel when the clothing touches the skin. Just remember standing. And next we'll do side bending. So again on the in-breath, raise the arms up like this. And keep your fingers and arms straight, close to the head. On the out-breath, bend over the right side as far as you comfortably can. Feel the stretch in the side. In-breath, lift up. And the other side, out-breath. In-breath. Again to the right, out-breath. In. To the left, out-breath. In. And once more to each side, out-breath to the right. Now on the out-breath, lower both arms. Relax. Just close the eyes. Just try to feel the internal, the inner body sensations, pulsations, prickling sensations, any aches or pains, maybe the increased heart beating. Just remember standing. The last exercise will be the head turning. On an in-breath, turn your head to the right as far as you can. Try to look over the right shoulder. On the out-breath, all the way back to the left. Just concentrate into the neck vertebrae, imagining, feeling them loosening up. In-breath back to the right. Out-breath left. Once more to each side. Next in-breath, let the head stop in the center. Just close the eyes, you can just feel the inner vibrations, the subtle vibrations. By now the whole body should come alive with more life force vibrations, pulsations. Just feel that present moment awareness. Okay, and now let's come back to your seat. Take up the meditation seat posture. Again, try to sit straight with the back and the spine in erect but relaxed position. Have your feet flat on the floor if you're sitting in a chair. And gently close the eyes. And first of all, just feel the weight of the body pressing the seat. Sort of imagine that 100 or more pounds of flesh and bones pressing the seat. Feel your feet tucked underneath. And feel your hands and fingers touching. And feel the weight of the arms hanging from the shoulders. And feel your head balanced on top of the neck. Just mentally feel that outline of the sitting body. Relax your face muscles. Feel some sensations on your face. Feel the eyes resting in the sockets and the eyelids stretched over the eyeball. From that point behind the eyes again, try to feel the outline of the sitting body. If you can, try to hold that outline of the sitting body in the mind's eye, just a general sense of the buttocks and feet underneath, hands and arms in the middle, the head on top. Not a visual image, but just an outline of various sensations. Just remember sitting, sitting, the present moment of this body. It's coming to the door of the laboratory. Feeling the external outline of the body. And then begin some deep, slow breathing. Try to take 3 or 4 seconds to slowly breathe in. Hold the air in the lungs for 2 or 3 seconds. Then slowly breathe out, feeling all those contracting sensations of the out breath. Feeling the last bit of air go out of the lung. And then the next in breath. Try to take a few deep, slow breaths like that, thinking like this to yourself. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. And you can continue with some deep, slow breathing, or if you're getting tired of that, you can just make the breaths a little bit shorter, but still try to do a little bit of deep, slow breathing to help concentrate. We're going to count the breaths from 1 to 10. Let's concentrate on the expanding and contracting sensations of your abdomen, rib cage, and chest. And with the next expanding in-breath, mentally count 1. With the contracting out breath, also count 1. 1 complete round of breath. With the next expanding in breath, count 2. With the contracting out breath, count 2. Next in breath, 3. Out breath, 3. In breath, 4. Out breath, 4. In breath, 5. Out breath, 5. In breath, 6. Out breath, 6. In breath 7. Out breath 7. In breath 8. Out breath 8. In breath 9. Out breath 9. In breath 10. Out breath 10. Now discontinue the counting. Discontinue any controlled breathing. Just let the breathing return to its uncontrolled rhythm, but continue to stay focused on the subtler movements, the subtler or shorter expanding and contracting sensations of the abdomen or rib cage, chest. And just knowing when the breath is coming in and knowing when the breath is going out. Try to notice the brief pauses between the breaths. After the in-breath, there's a brief pause. After the out-breath, there's a brief pause. It's very important to notice the pauses. Because if you can notice the pauses, you'll be there for the start of the next out-breath or in-breath. Otherwise, our mind normally wanders during the pauses. So just being aware of breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. That's the mental knowing what the body is doing. Knowing that it's breathing in, knowing the pause, the sitting posture, knowing when the breath is going out. Just breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. Breath by breath, moment by moment. Try to notice how each breath is different. Sometimes it's longer. Sometimes it's shorter. Sometimes it's an easy breath. Sometimes a difficult breath. It's always changing. Breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting, the ongoing connection to the present moment. This breathing body is our natural connection to the present moment, to awareness. Try to notice all the subtle expanding sensations of the in-breath and the pause, subtle contracting sensations of the out-breath and the pause. It's like opening the door of the laboratory, going inside the laboratory, the body laboratory. Sit down at the microscope and look down, peer down to the breathing process. The expanding in-breath and the pause. The contracting out-breath and the pause. Just noticing all the subtle sensations. Just turning up the power of the mental microscope to notice more and more subtle details of the breathing process. All the different little sensations. During the pause, check the posture. If the head is drooping downwards or the spine slouching, mindfully with the next in-breath, mindfully straighten the body back up to overcome that drowsiness, sleepiness. Keeping the back and head in a straight line. But at the same time, be alert for thoughts sneaking up into the mind to steal away your attention. If you get caught up in thinking, recognize it as thinking. Gently let go of the thoughts. Take a deep breath, come back into the body. Come back to in sitting. Out, sitting. Breath by breath, moment by moment, cultivating mindfulness and concentration. If you have too many thoughts, you can go back to counting your breaths from 1 to 10 to try to stay more awake and focus. Or combine that with some deep, slow breathing to help stay concentrated. the mind gets well focused and relaxed. If you like, you can, contemplate the right view of suffering. What is suffering? What's the cause of suffering? What is the cessation of suffering? And the path leading to the cessation of suffering. If you catch yourself drowsy or lost in thoughts, just take a few deep, slow breaths. Get plugged back into the breathing body, the present moment. It's coming back to breathing in, sitting, breathing out, sitting. Breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. Thoughts come and go. Sounds come and go. Various sensations of pleasure or pain come and go. Sleepiness comes and goes. This is just all the continuous flow of change and impermanence through this body and mind. If we lose that connection to the breathing body, then the mind gets easily dragged away and drowns in worry, fear, anxiety, sorrows, greed, hatred, and deluded thought. This breathing body is the only thing we have, our only connection to the present moment, the only physical connection. It's our lifeline, our life preserver to the present moment. Only when the mind is resting in the present moment with full awareness, concentrated awareness, then we can clearly see what is suffering, the cause of suffering, and understand what is the cessation of suffering. You remove the cause of suffering, you experience the cessation of suffering. And the way leading to the cessation of suffering, starting with right view. And all the other factors of the Eightfold Path. Now, friends, we want to spend the last some minutes of this meditation period in cultivating and radiating out thoughts of metta or friendliness and best wishes to ourself and all other beings. So again, try to take a few deep, slow breaths, filling up expanding the abdomen, the rib cage, and chest, upper chest, holding the air in the lungs. A few seconds and slowly breathing out. Just try to take a few more deep, slow breaths like that, especially after breathing in, hold the air in the lungs and imagine that oxygenated blood going, or the oxygen in the lungs going into the bloodstream, the blood carrying the life force and oxygen out to all the cells and tissues of the body. And feel that relaxing, healing sensation on the out breath. And doing this deep, slow breathing, holding the air in the lungs to oxygenate all the blood, send it out to the body. This is like sending metta to your own body, mind, and nervous system. Being friendly to your body. A lot of people are unfriendly to their bodies by not doing proper exercise, not doing deep breathing, other types of harmful things. Deep breathing is one of the most beneficial, healing things that you can do for this body. So just imagine that those pleasant sensations of that oxygenated blood going out, being that friendliness and metta to your own body, mind, nervous system. Kind of feel that as a healing energy. Just try to take a few more deep, slow breaths like that, thinking like this to yourself. May I be well, peaceful, and mindful. May I be free from worry, fear, anxiety, greed, hatred, and delusion. May I be free from the pains and sufferings of body and mind brought about by such unwholesome thoughts, speech, and action. May I have the patience, strength, mindfulness, and wisdom to meet and overcome all difficulties in life. May I be able to continue to deepen my understanding of the Dhamma and practice meditation to help free the mind from confusion and suffering. May I be well, mindful, and wise. And we want to radiate these same thoughts of friendliness, best wishes outwards to our parents, other family members, relatives, good friends, colleagues where you work, other persons. Again, if you can take a deep, slow breath, and on the out breath, just imagine sending these waves of metta energy, that out breath of sensations. Just imagine these thought vibrations entering their bodies and minds, soothing the fires of their greed, hatred, and delusions, and their pains of body and mind, fears, worries, anxieties. With the idea that may all of them be well, happy and peaceful, free from greed, hatred, fear and ignorance, free from pains and sufferings of body and mind brought about by their unmindful thought, speech, and actions. May they also have the patience, strength, mindfulness, and wisdom to meet and overcome all difficulties in life. If they haven't already, may they also be able to hear the teachings of the Dhamma, acquire a right view, practice meditation, to free their minds from confusion and suffering. May they be well, mindful, and wise. And again, extending these thought vibrations out further. Just imagine with each out breath, the vibrations of metta, or pure wisdom, pure love, pure energy. These healing vibrations going outward across the cities, the farms, hills, valleys, through the cities, across the whole countries. Thinking about all the ordinary common folks all over the whole country that are suffering from fear, worry, anxiety, or loneliness, other problems connected with this pandemic situation, fear of losing their jobs, losing their loved ones. So many people died, their loved ones. Just sending them these wishes. May all beings be well, peaceful, and mindful. May all beings be free from worry, fear, anxiety, greed, hatred, and delusions. May all beings have the patience, strength, mindfulness, and wisdom to meet and overcome all difficulties in life. May all beings be able to hear the teachings of the Dhamma, to acquire right understanding, to practice meditation, to free their minds from confusion and suffering. May all beings be well, mindful, and wise. Also send a few breathfuls of out breaths of metta vibrations to all the politicians and the mayors and cities, governors of states, politicians in Washington, the White House, the president. Just wishing that these metta vibrations could calm the fires of their wrong views, wrong understandings, prejudices, greed, hatreds, and delusions, giving them the strength and the wisdom to make the right decisions that affect so many millions of people. Just with the thought that may all of them, may all beings in the whole world be well, mindful, and wise. May all beings be free from the pains and sufferings of body and mind brought about by their unwholesome thoughts, speech, and actions. May all beings have the patience, strength, mindfulness, and wisdom to meet and overcome all difficulties in life. And may all beings be able to hear the mind-healing teachings of the Dhamma, develop the right understanding, right view, to practice, learn and practice meditation to free their minds from confusion and suffering. And may all beings be able to live peacefully and harmoniously together, understanding the ultimate interconnectedness and interdependence of all things. May all beings be well, mindful, and wise. May all beings be well, mindful, and wise. Just like a mantra reverberating throughout space. Well, mindful, and wise. Sammi sankhara anicchati yada panyaya pasati atanibindati dukkhi Esamaggo visuddhiya nati janam apanya-cha panya nati ajayito Yam hi janancha panyacha Siri nibbana santiki. Dukkha pata ca nidukkha, bhaya pata ca nibbaya, soka pata ca nisoka, hontu sabbe Pipanino. All conditioned things, the five aggregates of this body, mind, and world are impermanent. When one sees this with the eye of wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with suffering. This is the path to purity. And there's no meditation without wisdom, no wisdom without meditation. One who both meditates and is wise is close to peace and freedom. And may the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. In this way, may all beings live with mindfulness and wisdom. Thus spoke the Buddha. So you can join in chanting the word sadhu 3 times slowly with the breathing, doing the chanting on a long out breath. You can follow my lead. Sadhu.